Okay, Megan, it is Thursday, April 22nd, 2021, and we are talking about the 16-year-old girl in Columbus, Ohio, who was shot and killed by police um, the day of the Derek Chauvin verdict. Um, Apparently, she had called the police because some girls had followed her home to her group foster home and were somehow harassing her. So she went to take care of being harassed by going after these girls with a knife. The cops pull up mid scuffle. Um, the girl who had called the police, who has the knife, had backed one of the other girls up against a car and was wielding the knife, and the cops shot and killed her. And Joy had mentioned this the other day on air. I guess it was yesterday. And in response, went back and forth with Don Lemon, or afterwards went back and forth on text with Don Lemon, who went on TV to say, "Listen, we got to take these situations one at a time, understand the situation of each one. We can't lump everything together." And he defended the actions of the police that was the right thing to do. Sonny, who is longtime friends with Don Lemon, thinks that he was wrong. Um, and she listed, how white teenagers have been treated in the past by cops after they have murdered several people, um, which, as we all know, has been pretty darn nice. They're given water, taken to Burger King. They certainly aren't killed. So here's a situation where a few things are true and things are not comparable. One, um, the police are making a split second decision um, when they're rolling up, and there's an active assault happening with a knife. Should they have tried to de-escalate the situation or deter the attacker with something less than deadly force? Probably. Um, to reach for the gun initially, um, again, we could be looking very clearly at a just a biased instinct, because it was a group of black people in a fight and the cop went for the gun first. Whereas if it were white people, perhaps the cop wouldn't have gone for the gun first. We don't know. But it does seem like there could have been, as tense as the situation was, and with a knife wielding assailant, we can't deny that there could have been other options. Would they have saved that girl who may have been about to be knifed? We don't know. And was the girl about to be knifed? We don't know what she was planning. If the knife was just there as a threat, we don't really know, and we'll never know because she's dead. So Don's right about let's look at every situation. I don't think that any of us have enough information to be able to say this was the right thing to do, this was the wrong thing to do. We know that there were options, and some of them weren't taken, and so they'll investigate. I'm not a big fan of cops investigating cops, but this one isn't like a clear-cut attack, specifically not in the same way that the George Floyd murder was. Again, we're using that as a basis. Everything doesn't need to be a George Floyd episode to be wrong. This one's just a little tougher because there is a weapon involved and an ongoing assault. And that's my next argument. Sonny talks about Dylan Roof and Kyle Rittenhouse and people who shot and killed multiple people were still armed and were taken into custody unharmed and provided treats. The difference there is there weren't cops on the scene while the assault was happening. So had this 16-year-old girl actually stabbed the friend and the friend or the foe, the other person, and that person, were laying on the ground, would they walk right up and shoot the 16-year-old girl who did the stabbing? I don't think so. Don't know. But again, we won't know because the girl is dead, because the cops didn't give any other alternative to the end of that story other than to kill her. So there's, as you like to say, nuance in this. And you decide when it's your turn to speak, the very first thing that you say is, well, I didn't text with Don Lemon about it because, I guess I don't have that kind of relationship with them. Your first reaction is to talk about feeling slighted about having not as close as a relationship to Don Lemon as two of your co-hosts. So peak Meghan. Then you say words, and you talk about, emotions running high after the Derek Chauvin verdict and, the events of the past year, and then trail at the end. And you could say the last, 275 years. But I think you're glossing over a little bit just because, it's been a difficult year for you. And this has been a year when you've learned about, the extent of your white privilege. And you're just barely denting the surface on that one. You've at least acknowledged that there is something to learn. I don't know how well you're learning it yet, but you've at least acknowledged that there's work to be done. But to deny that there aren't decades of anger, generations of anger about this kind of treatment that are right on the surface is just a little, not reading the room, I think, a little bit. You bring up all of your friends in law enforcement and military and say, hey, this cop needs to be protected too. Hey, LeBron James, don't go blasting him on Twitter. Nobody said go kill the cop. That's not what anybody's saying. They're just saying they want accountability for what happened, and there'll be an investigation. This one's going to be, it's not so clear cut. It doesn't seem like that was the right choice. It's going to be real hard to prove that there was some sort of bias in it, although likely there was. But it's funny that you brought up your cop friends today, when we still don't know how all of your law enforcement buddies feel about the Derek Chauvin verdict. Because not being on board with that is just being complicit with it happening again. So we go through that discussion. You ask the Congresswoman who's a guest if it was inappropriate for Joe Biden to make a comment about the Derek Chauvin jury deliberations while they were deliberating. She answers no. And then Joy, through some sort of technical difficulty, just reiterates the jury was already sequestered at the time, so the question is moot. Meghan, Joy made your question moot. I think she probably wants to do that every day. Just shut your little trap. So I think that, it's another example of you having a long way to go to learn uh, about your station, and having a little more empathy and a little more consideration for stations that are not like how you grew up. You said, Joy and I were both brought up to respect authority, which is a really funny thing to say coming from you, because you continually say that as a Republican down deep in your core, you are hardwired to question authority. So, it, your argument wavers depending on what kind of argument you're trying to, or your 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 behavior changes depending on what kind of argument you're trying to make. Um, so I suggest you try to nail down what it is about authority as a Republican. Are you going to question it, or are you going to respect it? Um, you can't have it both ways. But both of them are in your core. So try to nail down what you're trying to say when you say, as a Republican, um, our job is to question authority, because I don't think that's what it